It's wild how fast a picture-perfect love story can flip into front-page drama. For years, Jeannie, Maya, and Jeezy were the couple everyone pointed to, like they got it all figured out. Two adults who'd been through heartbreak, worked on themselves, and finally found peace in each other's arms. It looked flawless. But behind those glassy Instagram smiles, something real heavy was simmering. The kind of tension no filter could hide. And now, after years of silence and keeping things pretty, Jeannie's had enough. She's done being quiet and ready to let the truth spill.
Things that I've been criticized for my whole life in my past relationships. Jeannie, you're too deep. You think about things too much. Like, why does everything gotta have a purpose? And I'm not one for small talk or small conversations. I wanna know, why do you think the way you do? What brought you to look at things the way you do? Who are you? Who's important to you? And I found my equal.
She's done staying silent. She's calling out the lies, the slick manipulation, and the deep betrayal that left her picking up the broken pieces of her life from the ashes of the man she once believed was her peace. It's raw, it's real, and it's heartbreaking. But here's the twist. While she's out here trying to heal and find her footing again, Jeezy's been hitting interviews talking about growth and purpose, acting like he's the one who's evolved. The nerve of it all. Now Jeannie's ready to pull the curtain back and show everyone what really went down behind that picture-perfect smile.
You know, I'm not gonna lie, it takes every day to just really sit and just be quiet in your thoughts, take care of me. But one thing I know is, you give God your pain, he will give you his power. Girl, period.
The same man who once said he'd never truly experienced love, turns out that line was never just deep talk, it was a straight-up confession. He wasn't reflecting, he was revealing a truth he didn't even mean to drop. It hits different now, knowing those words weren't poetic, they were a warning hiding in plain sight.
That's the crazy thing though, because as I say at 46, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
But I can't honestly tell you that I've experienced love.
See, this story didn't start with those divorce papers. It started way before that, when Jeannie first crossed paths with him. Back then, she was fresh out of heartbreak, dragging herself out of a toxic marriage that left her swearing she'd never fall in love again. She told everyone she didn't want marriage, didn't want kids, didn't even want to give anyone the power to hurt her like that ever again. She was guarded, tough, and done with romance. At least that's what she thought. Then came Jeezy, cool, calm, and calculated. He spoke with this quiet confidence, like a man who had already survived every storm life could throw at him. He didn't seem like he was chasing fame or chaos. He came across as grounded, spiritual, and focused. Or at least that's what Jeannie believed when he started talking about healing, faith, and purpose. In one interview, Jeezy said, "My purpose is walking in these footprints that God's left for me. My purpose is to be the best version of myself and to teach my culture everything that I learned along the way." Those words hit deep. They sounded like growth, like calm, like everything she'd been searching for. And for a woman who'd spent years protecting her heart, that sounded like peace. They met on The Real. Just another guest interview, nothing crazy or out of the ordinary. But what kicked off as playful back and forth on camera slowly turned into late-night phone calls, quiet dinners, and even that first date she would later call magic. They ate sushi, talked for hours like they'd known each other forever, and even ended the night salsa dancing. Pure movie energy. Jeannie said that by the end of that night, she could actually see forever with him. It felt like her second chance, her redemption story come to life. And once they finally went public, fans couldn't get enough. Everyone was calling it grown love, healed love, the kind of connection people dream about. Jeannie's whole vibe changed. She glowed different. Her interviews were full of gratitude, soft smiles, and that quiet kind of joy that told the world she finally found peace. And Jeezy, he played his role to perfection. Calm tone, smooth words, and always polished. He talked about growth, about being a better man, about how love transformed him into something deeper. In 2021, Jeannie said something that stopped fans in their tracks. She said, "Jeezy made me realize I'd never really felt safe in my life." That one line hit people hard. It became the quote that defined their whole love story for millions. She told everyone she finally understood what love was supposed to feel like: steady, secure, and peaceful. She even said she'd found her equal. But behind that beautiful picture, the cracks were already showing. Because while no one saw was that while Jeannie was discovering what safety felt like, Jeezy was busy crafting an image. He'd already lived through his rough years, his street era, and was deep into his rebrand as the wise, motivational rapper. But Jeannie gave him something no one else ever could: credibility. credibility. A clean slate, a new chapter, the story of a family man who found redemption through love. She poured her entire heart into that image. She changed everything, her views on marriage, her stance on motherhood. After years of saying she didn't want kids, she took a leap of faith for him. She went through the IVF journey, the hormones, the emotional highs and lows, all because she believed in the dream they built together. When baby Monaco arrived, it felt like the fairy tale had finally come full circle. Fans were overjoyed. Magazines called them Hollywood's quiet power couple. Jeannie would post sweet photos of their daughter with captions about faith, growth, and healing, words that painted a picture of peace. And Jeezy? He leaned all the way into that narrative. He was the calm, collected father figure the world wanted to see. But then things started to shift, quietly at first. He began to pull away. The man who once made her feel safe started feeling like a stranger. He got busier, colder, and harder to reach. The same person who had once taught her what peace looked like began moving through their home like a ghost. The warmth was gone, replaced with silence and distance. And then came that interview, the one that blew up the internet. Jeezy sat across from a talk show host, calm and composed, his tone almost saint-like, and said, "As I sit here at 46, I can't honestly tell you that I've experienced love." The internet stopped cold. People couldn't believe it. This was the same man who once called Jeannie his soulmate, the one who said he was walking in the footprints God left beside her, the man who built a whole brand around family, healing, and growth. When he claimed he'd never experienced love, it hit like a punch to the gut. Not just for Jeannie, but for everyone who ever believed in their fairy tale. While he was out there rewriting history in interviews, Jeannie was at home staring at the wreckage, trying to make sense of what just happened. Friends say she was stunned, not only by what he said, but how he said it. That calm tone, that lack of accountability, the way he positioned himself as the poor wounded hero in a story that he set on fire, it was unreal. He talked about therapy, about wanting peace, saying things like, "I can only do what I can do. I can't expect someone else to do what I'm doing." Sounds deep, right? But Jeannie knew the truth. Those words were code for something else. He had already decided who was going to be the villain in his version of events. And to the world, his calm delivery made him look wise, like a man who had simply outgrown his marriage. But for Jeannie, that was pure gaslighting dressed in scripture. Because while he was out there preaching self-love and spiritual growth, she was at home trying to put herself back together after being completely blindsided. This was the same man who once said love was about partnership, and yet he filed for divorce without warning. One minute they were celebrating his new book, smiling for photos and talking about legacy, and the next she was being served divorce papers by a total stranger. No conversation, no closure, just cold papers and headlines waiting to explode. And the worst part, he wasn't even finished with the performance. Days after the filing, Jeezy's publicist released a carefully worded statement calling it a heavy-hearted decision, saying he still had love and respect for Jeannie. But behind that polished press release, she was left cleaning up the emotional chaos, protecting their daughter, facing the cameras, and trying to stay strong while the world watched everything fall apart. When Jeannie finally spoke, it wasn't loud or dramatic. It was calm, soft, but powerful. She said, "You give God your pain, and He'll give you His power." That one line said it all. It told the world she wasn't broken, she was transforming. Her energy shifted, and everyone could feel it. As the dust began to settle, fans started seeing things differently. Maybe Jeezy won the public narrative, but Jeannie, she was about to claim the real redemption arc. For years, she had protected his image. She defended him in interviews, stood by him through the rumors, and carried the peace he loved to preach about. But now, the silence was cracking wide open. When Jeannie started hinting that Jeezy's version of events wasn't the full story, people began asking the questions he couldn't afford to answer. The internet lit up with speculation, and suddenly the perfect love story looked more like a performance. By the time the divorce was finalized in June 2024, Jeannie had gone completely quiet. No interviews, no tell-all, no messy posts, just soft reflections about healing, prayer, and time with her daughter. It looked peaceful on the surface, but behind that calm exterior, a storm was building. Because while Jeezy was still out there pushing his evolved man image, doing interviews about purpose, walking in God's footprints, and learning to love himself, Jeannie was sitting on something he didn't see coming: the truth. And when she finally chose to speak, her story shattered the polished image he'd been selling to the public. The version of events she described was nothing like the fairy tale he had painted for the public. She'd stayed silent out of love, for her daughter, for peace, for dignity. But silence only lasts so long when someone keeps rewriting your life in public. The truth was coming, and this time, Jeannie wasn't holding back. Those words sliced through the internet like lightning. Overnight, clips of her interview went viral. TikTok was flooded with women sharing their own stories, stitching her words into their videos, talking about being strong for a man who called it growth, while slowly draining them dry. And just like that, Jeannie became something she never planned to be, the voice of every woman who'd ever been made to feel like she wasn't enough, after giving absolutely everything. But what most people didn't realize was just how deep Jeezy's rise had gone. Jeannie revealed that while he was out there doing interviews saying things like, "I can only do what I can do," he was quietly cutting her out of the very projects they built together. Business ventures, foundation work, even a documentary they had started filming as a couple, he slowly erased her name from all of it. He told her it was just cleaning up the business side. But what he was really doing was rewriting history, making sure his version of the story stood alone, free of her fingerprints. She talked about how he'd gaslight her with calm words and colder silences, how every time she tried to communicate, he'd respond with, "I need peace." It sounded spiritual, but it was a way to shut her down. He turned her pain into proof that she was the problem, while he played the role of the enlightened one. Every conversation became a trap. She'd reach for connection, and he'd twist it into chaos control. And then came the gut punch, the revelation that left fans speechless. While the world was watching him evolve, behind the scenes he was editing her out piece by piece until she barely existed in the story they once shared. Jeannie wasn't just speaking her truth, she was finally showing receipts. The woman who once whispered through heartbreak was now turning calm into courage, and the world was listening louder than ever. Jeannie revealed that she didn't even find out about the divorce from him. She found out from her team. She was literally sitting in a production meeting, focused on work, when her phone buzzed with a headline that flipped her world upside down. Imagine that. The man who once called himself her equal didn't even have the decency to pick up the phone. It was the kind of betrayal that doesn't make you scream. It stuns you into silence. She said she didn't cry right away. She just froze, staring at her phone like the words were written in another language. And in a way they were, because everything she thought was real had just turned into fiction. The love, the promises, the partnership, all rewritten without her consent. But Jeannie didn't stay down for long. She went inward, straight to therapy, her faith, and her daughter. That became her safe space, her healing ground. Slowly, she started stepping back into the public eye, but not as a victim, not as the ex. She showed up as a woman who rebuilt herself from the ground up. Her energy was softer, but stronger, like someone who finally knew her worth. And when she talked about motherhood, everything shifted. She said, "My greatest accomplishment in life will always be who I raise. Because when the noise fades, that's what love is supposed to look like. Safe, pure, unconditional." That quote hit timelines like lightning. Fans flooded her comments with messages like, "She's healed," and "This is the Jeannie we missed." Others said she didn't just move on, she evolved. She wasn't chasing closure anymore. She was living it. Her glow wasn't just peace, it was power. Meanwhile, Jeezy was still out here trying to hold on to his narrative. He showed up at events, smiling for cameras, speaking in calm tones, dropping quotes about peace and purpose like they were scripture. But after Jeannie spoke, even his calm started looking rehearsed. The mystique cracked. People began putting the pieces together. The quiet filing, the months of silence, the blindsiding, the polished interviews that suddenly didn't sound so sincere anymore. The same fans who once praised him for growth started seeing the truth behind the act, and it became painfully clear. The man who claimed he'd never experienced love had actually been loved harder and deeper than he could ever bring himself to admit. Jeannie's silence had once been mistaken for weakness, but now it was her greatest revenge. She didn't have to drag him, she just had to heal out loud, and that spoke louder than anything he ever said in front of a camera. Jeannie's not trying to prove anything anymore. Her peace isn't for show, it's real. These days, when she posts, it's not about revenge or heartbreak, it's about balance. Her captions feel like pages from her journal, filled with lessons and quiet strength. Healing means remembering who you were before they broke you. In another, God removed what I thought I needed to remind me who I am. Each word feels honest, raw, and grounded in truth. Her whole energy is shifted. from defending herself to defining herself. She's back to hosting, back to producing, back to smiling. And this time, it's not curated for the cameras. It's genuine. You can see the peace in her eyes, not just in her posts. The same industry that once whispered about her behind closed doors is now calling her one of the strongest comeback stories in entertainment. Fans are saying what everyone's been thinking. Jeannie didn't lose Jeezy, he lost Jeannie. Because when the dust settled, one truth stood taller than all the gossip. He might have taught her how to trust again, but she taught him what real accountability looks like. And that lesson, that's the one that's going to linger long after the interviews stop and the cameras fade. During her latest podcast appearance, Jeannie closed with one final line that wrapped her entire journey into a single moment of power. She looked straight into the camera and said, "Love without respect isn't love, it's performance, and I'm done performing." That one clip went viral instantly. No tears, no drama, just quiet truth, and that silence spoke volumes. That was the official ending to their so-called fairy tale. The illusion's gone, the curtains dropped, and Jeannie Mai, she's just getting started. Now she's standing in her own story, stronger, freer, and finally unfiltered. And if there's one thing this whole saga proved, it's this. No matter how polished a man's narrative might sound, the truth always finds its mark. So, what do you think? Did Jeezy build his changed man image just to protect his ego? Or was Jeannie right all along about the lies hiding behind his peace talk? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe, because this story, it's far from over.